We're kicking off Week 6 with another classic NFC East rivalry matchup. Maybe one of these days this game's narrative won't center around Saquon, but that day is not today. Will the Giants be able to defend their home turf against the defending Super Bowl champion Eagles, or will Philly keep on soaring? We'll find out in the simulation, but first, we have to get behind the bar and make our drink, the Fishtown Iced Tea. Alright, we have survived to Week 6. I have officially burned through all of the videos that I started working on before the season started, which has its pros and cons. You know, on the plus side, these videos are coming out much closer to when the games are coming out, and since I've already posted some videos by the time this one is being recorded, I can start to incorporate some of the feedback that you guys have been giving. On the downside, there's definitely some crunch to keep these videos rolling, because that runway is a lot shorter, but as I've been working on these, I've been getting more efficient with the whole process, so that's definitely helped offset some of the crunch. But enough behind the scenes talk, let's get into the drinks, starting with Philadelphia and the Fish House Punch. Now, the Fish House Punch sounds like what happened if you wore a Chiefs jersey to the Super Bowl parade, but it is actually a very old drink out of Philadelphia, dating all the way back to 1732. That's right, this drink predates the United States as a country. Originating in the oldest fishing club in the 13 colonies, the state in Schuylkill, also known as the Schuylkill Fishing Company of Pennsylvania. That's where this name comes from, as their clubhouse was also known as the Fish House. The drink itself is a very classic historical punch recipe consisting of lemons, sugar, cognac, rum, and peach brandy. It would have been made in large batches and served in large bowls for everybody to enjoy, and the size of the serving bowl is actually something that came up quite often in my research for this drink. In 1744, it was described as big enough to have swimmed half a dozen young geese. And part of the reason this bowl was so big was because it doubled as a baptismal font. So we've got a bowl of booze big enough to dunk an infant in, and this is not a weak drink. It's said that after George Washington had some at a victory toast after the war, he was unable to make an entry in his diary for 3 days. As a result of this potency, the drink is sometimes diluted down with either black tea, lemonade, or seltzer water. Speaking of tea, that brings us to New York's representative. You knew it was coming one of these days, the Long Island Iced Tea. In many ways, the Long Island Iced Tea is kind of the modern successor to the punch, right? A drink that is intended to be easy to make despite a long ingredient list, and is intended to be quite strong and potent, while still being palatable to a very wide audience. Now, there's two competing stories as to where this now ubiquitous drink came from. The first one, and the one that I think is more plausible, is that it was created by Robert Rosebud Butt in 1972 as part of a competition to create a new drink featuring triple sec while he was working at the Oak Beach Inn on Long Island. To me, this story ticks all the boxes. It's simple but appropriately murky, and the 70s really were the pinnacle of drinks like the Long Island, where bartenders were essentially just grabbing any bottle they had on hand on the bar, throwing it all together into a drink, and then giving it a silly name. If you remember from the Miami vs. Buffalo episode, the Rum Runner and its laundry list of ingredients came from the 70s, as well as drinks like the Blue Hawaii and the Tequila Sunrise. The other origin story is that this drink was made in the 1920s in a part of Kingsport, Tennessee, known as Long Island, by one Old Man Bishop. Beyond just why the other story holds water, there's a couple of reasons why this story feels quite suspicious to me. Firstly, the recipe it puts forward is quite different from the modern, currently accepted recipe. Instead of being an equal parts cocktail, it has twice as much whiskey and vodka as it does tequila, rum, and gin. It also uses maple syrup instead of simple syrup and doesn't have any triple sec at all. Also, originating in the 20s means that this is a Prohibition-era cocktail. And most Prohibition-era cocktails only featured one or two base spirits because, it was Prohibition. The most common spirits are bathtub gin and bootlegged whiskey, yet in, respectfully, middle of nowhere Tennessee, they came up with a drink that calls for 5 different spirits, including vodka and tequila? Lastly, as far as I can tell, there's no actual written recipe for the drink until after Rosebud created it, and the story for this Kingsport origin seems to be solely traced back to Kingsport tourism officials. If I'm being charitable, I would say that a precursor to the Long Island Iced Tea was created in Kingsport in the 20s, before being shaped into its modern form by Rob Butt in 72. As for the drink itself, you know what a Long Island is. Equal parts vodka, white rum, tequila, gin, triple sec, lemon juice, and simple syrup, topped off with cola. A perfectly serviceable drink, even if one food critic did call it An act of mixological atrocity favored by college students and wastrels. All right, now despite having a lot of ingredients, this is actually going to be a very easy cocktail to make because it is equal parts and it's being built in the glass. Built in the glass is self-explanatory, no shaker or stir for this one. And then equal parts is also pretty obvious. It means that we are doing the same amount of every ingredient that's going into this drink, with the exception of one. In this case, that's going to be 3/4 of an ounce, so very straightforward. It also means that the drink is very easy to scale up or scale down because you don't have to worry about making sure the ratios between different ingredients are preserved. So, starting off for this drink, we are going to begin with our 3/4 of an ounce, again, equal parts, of aged rum. Again, you know, the Fish House Punch would have been made with aged rum. The Long Island is made with white rum traditionally. I think the aged rum will give us a little bit more character, be a little bit more interesting. Next up is the tequila. You could go something with some color on the tequila. I have a Blanco, so I'm using a Blanco. That's about as far as my thought process went there. Then the gin. In this case, the gin I'm using is a very floral gin, so hopefully that'll mean that, you know, a little bit of that comes through in this absolute smorgasbord of a cocktail, and we can get some interesting notes playing there. And then finally, our last spirit, cognac. This is a new cognac to me. It's not the type I usually get, so we shall see. I think it'll mix quite well. I think it'll get along well in this drink. Now the non-alcoholic ingredients, lemon juice, gives some acidity to this drink. Then finally some sweetness to balance all of that out. Simple syrup. Need to make more simple syrup. Running low on that. And then the final decision I had to make, right, is what am I topping this off with? Long Island iced tea will be topped off with cola, typically Coke, you know, just whatever you have on hand. A Fish House Punch would have been topped off with, you know, black tea or lemonade, like I mentioned earlier. So I settled on black tea because I think it's fitting that, you know, that this drink is called a Fishtown Iced Tea, you know, so it should probably actually have some tea in it. So we are going to top this off with tea. I'm going to do about 2 ounces initially, and then we're going to see if that should be more or less. I'll do 3. We'll call 3 ounces of tea. Essentially top off and dilute to your discretion. So then we are just going to give that a quick stir with our straw to make sure that everybody is sort of well acquainted with each other. We're not getting any sort of, you know, layering or separation going on there. Because my tea is still, the tea, if you're using tea, it should be cooled. Mine's still a little bit warm, so I might get a little bit more dilution than I wanted. But there you have it, plain and simple. Looks like a Long Island iced tea, but this is the Fishtown Iced Tea. Give it a try. Woo! Yeah. Very drinkable. Very similar to a Long Island in some ways. It is not what I would traditionally call a good drink. It's not going to win any awards at any sort of, you know, cocktail convention or anything. But, like, if you're making this for a game, it'll absolutely get the job done. I mean, there's 3 ounces of foolproof spirits in there. And you definitely feel it a little bit when it sort of starts going down. You do not feel it at all when it's in the mouth. Like, this drink is very effectively hiding 3 ounces of booze in it. So this will be a great game day drink because you can just kind of sip it. It's nice. You get a lot of the flavors sort of coming in at different times and in different varieties based on, you know, sort of that sip. Definitely the main sort of flavor profile for it is like an Arnold Palmer, honestly. The lemon juice and the black tea is creating a really similar effect. And then once those flavor notes have kind of washed over your taste buds and it's sort of, you know, starting to fade, there's a bit of a long tail to it where all of the sort of, vapors of the alcohol in it start sort of creeping back up a little bit, and that's where you get, your tequila notes. That's where you get some of those botanicals from the gin. That's sort of like a, grape pit notes from the cognac. That's where all of those start creeping in from the back. But very easy to drink, a very nice drink. That's going to be perfect while I watch the rest of the Michigan State game that's going on while I'm recording this. So, with our drink in hand, let's now get into the simulation. All right, a classic, if decidedly lopsided NFC East rivalry game. Giants get the ball first at their own 26-yard line. And the first play really set the tone for the rest of this game, as Jalen Carter just annihilates the Giants running back 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage, foreshadowing a whole bunch of punts. Hell, continuing the theme, after a scoreless first quarter, the first play of the second is an 8-yard sack of Dart on a play-action pass that fools nobody. Over halfway through the second quarter, Hurts finds a wide-open Dallas Goedert in the flat, who rumbles 24 yards to put the Eagles at the Giants' 3-yard line. On the very next play, Eagles finally wake up the scoreboard operator as Hurts barely crosses the goal line on this QB read for the rushing touchdown. It seems the score also woke up the Giants' offense, as with 25 seconds left in the half, Jackson Dart tucks the ball and runs it in untouched for an 8-yard rushing TD, tying the game up 7 at the half. Honestly, QB read seemed to be one of the only things that worked this game, as Jackson Dart jukes Saquon out of his shoes and scampers in for a 5-yard rushing TD, giving the Giants the lead. The next notable moment isn't until over halfway through the fourth quarter. Facing a 3rd and 3, usually pretty easy for the Eagles, but the Giants' defense isn't fooled at all by the play action and sacks Hurts all the way back to the 38-yard line. As a result, they trot out Jake Elliott to attempt the 55-yarder, which he pulls wide right, leaving the score untouched. Now the Eagles do manage one last drive and actually make it all the way to the Giants' 13-yard line, but this is Madden, so the AI manages the clock worse than Matt Eberflus, and Hurts throws a slant to Jahan Dotson 9 whole yards short of the end zone as time expires. Giants win 14-7. Now, I am not an Eagles fan. I just want to make that perfectly clear before I say this next part. This result ain't happening. The Eagles are 6-1 in their last 7 games against the Giants, and while the Jackson Dart era got off to a promising start, this Giants team just isn't built to compete with the defending Super Bowl champs yet. Speaking of Jackson Dart, it's not like he won this game with his arm, putting up only 166 passing yards and no touchdowns. That said, the stats are reminiscent of his win over the Chargers, so not the most unbelievable performance. As for Hurts, this reminds me a lot of his first 2 games of the season, where they really weren't asking him to throw the ball more than 10 yards downfield, only 2 incompletions, but again, also 165 yards, no touchdowns. Now the rushing stats is where we get to the injury asterisks that come on the sim result. Asterisk number 1, Tyrone Tracy. Now in the defense of both myself and Madden, there is a slim chance he could be back for this Week 6 matchup, though it's pretty unlikely. He also didn't do a whole lot for the Giants' ground game, putting up only 24 yards on 8 carries. On the Eagles side, Saquon didn't do a whole lot either, managing a pedestrian 42 yards on 12 carries. Now he may be a rookie, but we know Jackson Dart can run. He put up 54 yards and a touchdown on 10 carries against the Chargers. But forgive me for thinking that 74 yards and 2 touchdowns is a bit of a stretch, especially when Hurts only rushed 4 times for 28 yards. And the receiving stats is where the big asterisk hits. That's right, this sim was run before Malik Neighbors got injured, and his 6 catches for 70 yards definitely helped the Giants in this game. Coming back to that earlier asterisk, Tyrone Tracy was also far more effective through the air, hauling in 6 balls for 49 yards. Dallas Goedert was the Eagles' leading receiver, turning 6 receptions into 67 yards. Honestly, all of the Eagles' pass catchers, except for Devonta Smith, had a healthy number of catches. A.J. Brown had 4, Saquon had 4, Jahan Dotson had 5. They just didn't have any depth to them. In the Monte Carlo sim, we see pretty much the exact opposite outcome. Jackson Dart still isn't exactly slinging the ball around, and he takes a huge hit to his rushing yards, while Hurts gets a nice boost to both his passing and rush yards. As this sim has been corrected for injuries, Cam Scatabo gets the nod and posts some very nice rushing stats, while Saquon returns to all-pro form. Likewise, with Malik Neighbors out, Wan'Dale Robinson sees his targets tick up, while all of the Eagles' pass catchers benefit from Jalen's increased passing yards. The Monte Carlo scores for this matchup are also essentially completely the opposite of the Madden sim, as it predicts the Eagles easily dominating the Giants, with a 28-7 and 28-14 Eagles victory being about equally likely. Now, because the Monte Carlo sim results are the average of 10,000 games, it's pretty rare for the margin of victory to be larger here than in the Madden sim, but that's exactly what we have in this game, as it predicts a 29-13 Eagles victory. Do you agree with the simulations, or do you envision a different future? I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts down in the comments. As a reminder, our drink for this matchup is the dangerously downable Fishtown Iced Tea. If you make it, please let me know what you think, and I'd love to hear your suggestions for what drink should be your team's representative. Stay curious, stay thirsty, and I'll see you in the next one.